Hello everyone and welcome to the latest edition of Dubcast Daily as the Dubcast tackles the Women's Asian Cup. My name is Poletti, joining me is Burke. We're coming to you from outside of Stadium Australia where Japan have claimed the 2026 AFC Women's Asian Cup with a 1-0 victory over Australia. Burke, I think looking at the way we talk about this game coming in, it was not what we got on the field.
Yes and no. It may not have been what you talked about. I got what I came for. I said they needed to be physical. I got physical. Many really good opportunities came out of them being physical with the Japanese players. What else did I say? I said I wanted to see Kennedy dropping in to play the 5-back, which she did. Probably said other stuff. Never wrong, just early it seems. But yeah, obviously it's disappointing that we didn't win. But honestly, it was a really great watch overall. And Japan have been obviously the best team of the tournament. You can't really deny that. But hey, shout out Alana Kennedy, most valuable player of the tournament. Who was expecting that? Not her. She did say that, actually.
She wasn't expecting to be MVP of the tournament. She wasn't expecting to be Golden Boot of the tournament, which she wasn't, but she was in contention.
She was there for a moment.
For quite a long time of it until Riko Ueki scored against Korea Republic in the semi-final matchup. Is Alana Kennedy the big story of this tournament, just from a pure shock perspective?
I mean, if you're looking at it as shock value, probably, but there's 100 different threads you could pull out of this team. There's the whole, golden generation. Maybe they didn't win the trophy, but, won the hearts of the nation kind of thing. Again, they're really good at that. There's the proof that Joe is definitely the best option for the Matildas going forward. There's the World Cup that we've qualified for and is now coming up. It's only 15 months away. That's a horribly small number. There's plenty to talk about from this tournament, but Kennedy definitely has to be one of the biggest stories for sure.
In terms of breaking down the game, let's start with the Australians, and I want to start with all of the positives first. Every single player on that pitch played their heart out for 90 minutes. They did, when EVE came on, right, all the substitutions took place. They all played their hearts out. This was, I think, a more dominant performance than I think a lot of us expected. I think it was a lot more of a dominance performance than Niels Nielsen expected. Joe Montemuro expected it, as he indicated in the press conference after the game. But they were on it from minute one. This was unlike anything we'd seen from the Tillies at this tournament. Unlike anything we'd seen in the Joe Montemuro era to date. Caitlin Ford had a number of good chances. Sam Kerr had a number of good chances. Van Egmond had some good chances towards the end. Alana Kennedy had some good chances. There were so many opportunities here for the Matildas to put this game to bed, and unfortunately they couldn't. But I think when I look at this and I try to take the positive away from it, it's Joe Montemuro's game plan is starting to be embedded. It's working. He's getting the building blocks in place to be able to build this team into the future.
Yeah, he absolutely is. I mean, everyone saw Japan as this huge, terrifying opponent. I did.
Guilty.
I did. I posted about it on Twitter saying, can we play an 8-back against them? We didn't need to. 4 and sometimes 5 was good enough because this team is so well drilled under Joe. I felt really nervous before the game for them, but when they came out, there was no need. They were all on. I think shout out to Winnie Heatley for having one of the games of her life. Good luck getting away from this team now. I fear you are a permanent fixture. Sorry. I think Kyra also had an incredible game for the minutes that she played. There were a couple of really key interventions that she made defensively, which I think a lot of people don't credit her enough for defensively, her work. Everyone had a really good game, and that's not easy to say against Japan because of the team that they are. feel they probably weren't expecting us to come out the way that we did, and I think that really surprised them, and I'm glad it surprised them because, you know, we've got to keep these people on their toes. We've got to keep everyone on their toes. That's the way you know, progress and win tournaments and trophies. Yeah, it was a really good game. It was unfortunately one of those games that the Matildas have had before where they have all the chances and can't convert them, as opposed to pretty much every other game we've had this tournament where we've had 2 chances and made them. Very annoying that we decided to do this today, but you know what? It was a really fantastic tournament overall. This final game was deserving of being the final, and it was a great watch regardless. Obviously, it would have been a better watch if they had won, but it was still incredible. The scenes from the crowd were immense.
You mentioned the crowd there, Burke, and the largest crowd in Women's Asian Cup history, 74,300 something thousand.
Yeah.
Like, it was. We've seen the records shattered at this tournament. You know, they did it on day one, basically, right? You know, over 200,000 people through the gates, which I think got up to 300,000 by the time that this game took place. It's women's football's here to stay, right?
Yeah, I don't think it can go anywhere at this point. I hope we can now move on from the metric of having sold out stadiums of needing that to like prove its worth. No one's going to a Socceroos game and being like, oh, it's not sold out. Oh, it's not sold out. Like, no, nobody cares about that. Obviously, they want good crowds and they do get good crowds, but no one's there, you know, discrediting the validity of the Socceroos because they haven't sold out every ticket. And I think we need to start adopting that same opinion for the women's game. Maybe not for the A-Leagues. The A-Leagues could always use crowd boosts,
yeah.
But for the Matildas, I do think we need to stop being like, oh my God, it's not a sellout, it's over. It's over, it's not. It's not going to be over for a very long time. The Matildas are here to stay. They're not going anywhere. You will, unfortunately, continue to hear about them wherever you are. They have a window coming up in 3 weeks. The players, I don't think even knew about. Alana Kennedy certainly didn't know about it in the mixed zone, poor thing.
Yeah, I mean, because they had that run of 14 straight sellouts, starting with the France friendly, the pre-game, you know, before the Women's World Cup. And I think, you know, no one, as you said, you can deny the fact that they've continued to, you know, make history and continue to have massive attendances. Probably the lone exception there was that bumper window in Perth, the first one at the Joe Montemurro, where there was just so many games in such a short period of time that it was very hard to, you know, I mean, it's always hard to get people to one-off events at different points, let alone, hey, here's 4 games in 2.5 weeks. Good luck.
Good luck.
But, you know, here, the Women's Asian Cup, you know, there's like I said, there's just been so many records broken from a crowd attendance-wise. I think, you know, for the Matildas, we touched on it a little bit already. You know, Joe's got the groundwork in place now. There's talk pre-tournament. There's talk that, you know, who's moving on from this. We know Gori was, you know, going to call it quits after the Olympics, and then just said, no, I take it back.
Just give me 1 more minute, guys. Just one more shot.
And, you know, she had the game. She's had the tournament of her life. You know, has been absolutely fantastic when called upon. You know, so I think that's something, you know, to address. I mean, you've got a ready-made replacement there in Claire Wheeler, who, you know, I don't think we've seen with Cooney Cross too much yet, but I imagine they'll be able to build a combination. Although, to be fair, Joe has been using Gori as a 10 this tournament. You know, you've got Fowler there, you've got Sayer there, you've got, you know, all these players who can step into the role.
We've got options.
You know, pre-tournament, there were, you know, a few players from the dub who were on the periphery who could have been selected, that maybe they'll get a chance in the next window as well, in the coming windows. So I think, you know, regardless of who moves on at the end of this tournament, and I will say this to fans, don't be surprised if there are players moving on for this tournament. And, you know, there will probably be some of the 23 World Cup squad who, you know, stole the nation's hearts. But, you know, unfortunately, this is sport and not everyone can last forever. The old saying in sport, you know, Father Time is undefeated, right?
It is, yeah, unfortunate, but yeah, like you said, it's the natural progression of things. I think on that was something I found really nice to hear about from Joe. He spoke a lot in the mix zone, at least. I want to say it's all very much a blur at this point, about how he wants to set up a sort of game plan sort of similar to the way Japan had their, like, what was it, 50-year plan, 100-year plan, whatever it is.
Yeah.
For Australia, to just kind of pick a way of playing, pick an identity, pick a style, and then make it consistent. So they're having weekly technical meetings that have the head coaches of the junior and young Matildas in every week discussing what they're going to be doing. So they're already setting this up, because it's all well and good to have, you know, incredible players now and, you know, the idea of incredible players coming through, but if they're not running cohesively, if they're not all aware of what the game plan is, it's a lot harder to integrate them into that style of play. So I'm really excited about that idea, and I hope they can pull it off, because it's going to mean we'll look more like Japan, look more like Spain, where everyone knows exactly what's expected of them, regardless of, you know, where they're playing, who they're playing for, that kind of thing. So that I thought was really good to hear from Joe.
It was so refreshing to hear as well. It was Vince Rugari in the post-game press conference who asked the question.
There we go.
Where you know, and Joe's answer to that question was just consistency, and
Yeah.
you know, you elaborated on it there very nicely. It's the City Football Group. It doesn't matter where you play. If they have you marked in a particular position, you're playing that position. You know, and then you can go to other clubs within the City Football Group and you play in that position, and you know
what
move
you're
around.
doing.
Exactly, because they play the same way. You know, Japan, you know, the 100-year vision that they've got, and you know, bringing someone like Nils Nilsson in is a big part of that. You know, of that vision and making that work. And so I think the fact that, you know, we've got Joe Montemurro now, who, you know, he was a pundit during the World Cup, has been around Australian football for such a long time. He knows what it's like when coaches come and coaches go, and you know, they chop and change and the systems change. Like we heard, I heard Gary Van Egmond post the Western Sydney Wanderers game last night, where he talked about that exact same thing, where you've got, I believe the analogy he used was Tony Popovich is AC/DC and Josip Gombau is Mariah Carey, because it's just such a vast different style of tactic and coaches that are coming in one after the other, and they're chopping and changing. And so if you have that consistency, you end up hiring the coach who can play the way you want to play, which is what the City Football Group want to do. You know, I don't think it's hard to say that anyone outside of South Australia have heard of Michael Mitriciani before he was appointed coach of the City women's side here in the A-League Women, and he's done exactly what he was brought in to do, and that's continue the CFG way of playing. And so yeah, it is nice and refreshing to see Montemurro want to implement that here at a national team level. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on Australia from this game?
I think it was overall our best tournament that we've played in a good few years. Yep. Obviously, not counting the one random tournament that we set up that we won, because, you know, Mickey Mouse tournaments, blah, 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 whatever. Yeah, we had a great tournament. It was so good to watch. It felt simultaneously like watching vintage Matildas, but brand new at the same time. Yeah, I think it was a great tournament overall. Yeah,
I don't disagree. Like I said, everyone had a fantastic game tonight. Most of the players have had a fantastic tournament. I think, you know, I do read the comments. You know, I don't know, we have, you know, and I saw one that, you know, and like sometimes we just don't get to talk about all the players we want, you know, particularly when we've been doing these daily episodes. We're recording straight after the game finishes. It's so hard.
It really is.
You know, like tonight, like it's what, 12:20 a.m. right now?
12:32 a.m.
So like we're recording straight after the game, so there's going to be things we miss. But you know, like we've been appreciative of everyone's tournament that they've put in.
For sure.
We've been appreciative of all of you who have tuned in. You know, but we'll touch on Japan now, the winners of the tournament. You know, fantastic effort by Japan all the way throughout, and they were put to the challenge tonight, as we touched on. It was that first 15 minutes. I was saying to you in the press box that it was just like, this is such an un-Matildas-like performance compared to what we've seen for the rest of the tournament. They're making Japan work for this. Maika Hamana, an absolute golazo to open the scoring. The game's only goal in the 17th minute. You can't defend a shot like that. That is an inch-perfect shot, and, you know, it was no surprise that she was awarded Player of the Match.
Yeah, absolutely. She spoke about it after the game, about how she'd practiced this kind of shot and how it was like one of her favorites. So good for her, I guess. No, really good for her. That was an unbelievable goal. Just the spin on it, the time in which it took her to hit it, no time at all.
Yeah.
It just
the
really,
curve
really good.
Just so deceptive. Like,
Yeah.
it was.
There was nothing that could be done about it on Australia's part except for maybe step to a second quicker, but you're not. Who has that kind of reaction time?
No, because that's the way Japan play, and we see it, is that, you know, by the time you realise where the ball is, it's usually gone.
It's in the back of the net.
Exactly.
And it was.
Australia, you know, were able to change that a little bit tonight. They were able to, you know, put the pressure on. They were able to force mistakes from Japan we haven't seen all tournament. The goalkeeper, Yamashita, there was a moment in that first half where I think it was just a standard cross that came in, and she clutched the ball to her chest and fell down the way you would if you were trying to waste time in like the 85th minute. And I saw that and I just went, they're rattled. They're panicked. If the Matildas are going to do anything, they need to do it now.
Yeah.
This is how you do it. And she was rattled again. She put the ball directly into the path of Caitlin Ford, who, you know, shanked the shot wide. But, you know, like these, it was such an uncharacteristic performance from Japan, and Niels Nielsen touched on it post-game where he just went, this is tournament football. You win by any means necessary. It doesn't matter about playing the beautiful football. And, you know, some of the players touched on it as well after the game, and, you know, like, just win.
Just win.
And that's what they did. It didn't matter that, you know, they weren't able to do what they did to South Korea. They were able to do what they did to India, the Philippines. They didn't have to run the Matildas over because they got the game's only goal.
Yeah, that's all it takes. It doesn't matter how many goals you score as long as you've scored more than your opponent. That's actually kind of the first rule of this sport. Yeah, I do think whilst they didn't play their best game, they played exactly the game that they needed to play to win. And we were also playing that game. We just didn't execute fast enough. In the post-game mixed zone, Ellie Carpenter did talk about this, about how she felt if there had have just been like 5 more minutes, she reckons, and I believe her, that the Matildas would have found the equaliser. But yeah, it wasn't meant to be for us. I think, yeah, they definitely looked more on the back foot than they ever have in this tournament. And I think that's a real testament to Australia for being able to do that to them. Japan are one of the best teams in the world. There's a reason why they've made it through the tournament the way that they have. And there's a reason why they won. But we took it. I'm not on the team. Australia took it to them. The Matildas absolutely took it to them. And I think that made it a really, really good watch. I've said that 100 times, but it was a really good watch. What do you want me to say? What do you want me to do?
It was. We were all enjoying it as best as we could up in the press box. You know, look, at the end of the day, like, we are journalists, but we're also Australians. we feel, you know, the connection to this team, and, you know, like, we're very blessed to be in the position that we are. Right, we get to talk to the players, we get to talk to Joe Montemurro on a regular basis, and it's hard not to feel connected to this team. It's hard not to want them to do well, and you ride every kick, you ride every goal, you ride every emotion, because you get to develop that relationship. And, you know, and it becomes hard when you get a situation like this where, you know, like, there's been times throughout this tournament where, you know, criticism has been maybe needed, and, you know, it's hard to do that because, you know, you see, you know, the players in the vulnerable moments, you see the coaches in the vulnerable moments, and, you know, it's hard to, you know, say bad things.
Yeah.
Like, despite what some people might think, it is hard. It sucks, but I think, you know, ultimately, at the end of the day, what I've learned from this tournament is that the gap is not as big as what some people might think. There's a top 5 in Asia, and then there's a group of like 3 or 4 teams, and then there's a massive gap again. But coming into the tournament, we had it marked down as Japan, and then a gap, and then Australia, South Korea, China, North Korea, and then everyone else. And what Australia was able to prove tonight is that gap is a lot smaller than what a lot of us have thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't that just so fun? Like I said earlier, everyone had been treating Japan like this terrifying, huge threat, and they were and they are. But there's no need for us to fear them. We can. I keep saying we. I'm not on the team. They can step to them. They can push back. And they did. And they got really, really close. It's unfortunate that everyone felt like playing football on Australia's side, but no one felt like scoring a goal. But that's sometimes just the way it is. It's a game. I know I said we could win it, and we could have. But there's only 2 options.
They were so close to winning.
Or you lose.
They were so close.
They really, really were. I don't think I have much more to say outside of the fact that it's approaching 1 a.m. I'm very tired. I know you're very tired. This was a really great tournament. I had a really great time. Obviously, it would have been more fun if we had have won. But I think we've seen a different side to the Matildas than we've ever seen before, and it makes me really look forward to what we're going to get in the future. World Cup's only 15 months away. Hell, the next window's only 3 weeks away. Get excited.
Absolutely, get excited. We don't know who the Matildas are going to be playing in that window. We don't know if they're going to be playing in that window yet.
But they've been thinking about it.
They have. Joe Montemiro mentioned that in the post-game press conference because they have to, because of the way that the tournament schedule falls, the way the international windows fall, is that, you despite the fact you're trying to focus on winning a tournament, you've got to think about
There's more things
the next thing. You've got to book these things, weeks and months in advance in some cases, so... That's why there's an amazing team of people behind the scenes who help with that. I guess the last thing I want to touch on here is we looked at the goal for quality coming into the tournament, because I think for a lot of us, and I know people are going to get sick of listening to me talk about this, because the last real metric we had for Japan was that 4-0 loss at the Sheba Leaves Cup, and different coach, yes, different stadium, different environment, all those sorts of things. But, that was only 13 months ago.
That was.
To be able to close the gap that quickly, and a bad result, it is what it is. But, you look at the 2018 final, there was a 1-0 loss to Japan as well. Players move on. We've seen a lot of different players come through Japan. We've seen a lot of different players come through Australia in that time as well. It's not as difficult as what it might be on the surface, is it?
Not at all. Not at all. And I think tonight really, really clearly showed that. Australia has been one of the best teams at this tournament, and we've proved it easily. Nils Nilsson said it himself. Australia are a world-class team with world-class players, and they showed that tonight. They showed every bit of that tonight. The way that they kept running, the way that they kept playing, the way that Ellie Carpenter would take an extra second after getting the throw in to rile up the crowd. They're in it. They're absolutely in it. The best in the world aren't far away. They're pretty much right next to us. They're right next to us.
It's scary to think that Ellie Carpenter's got another 7, 8, 9 years in
Scary.
a Matildas jersey.
That's incredible. Thank God. Thank God.
Scary for everyone else.
Yeah, they should be scared. They should be scared.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. Look, I don't think I've got too much more to say. I know, I think the last thing I'll say is I'll leave you with an anecdote from the press conference. Nils Nilsson was asked how he planned to celebrate. And said, how are we supposed to celebrate? You can't get a beer after 11 o'clock here in Australia. I thought you were supposed to be a modern country.
He's a very funny guy.
He is so funny. He's been an absolute delight this tournament. It's been a pleasure to have him here, honestly. We've got plenty more content to come over the coming days and weeks here as we continue our Asian Cup fallout here on the Dubcast. There'll be plenty of social media content as well, so get around the social media pages, Facebook, X, Blue Sky, Instagram. We'll be all over that. And we'll be back to our regularly scheduled Dubcast programming as well soon as we tackle the return of the A-League Women competition, which started at the quarterfinal stages. Melbourne City have got a massive...
lot to catch up on.
Melbourne City have got a massive Champions League game coming up this week against PFC Nasaf from Uzbekistan, which, if you're watching any of Uzbekistan throughout this tournament, half of that Nasaf squad is the national team squad. So, plenty of familiar names and faces that you've seen throughout this tournament, you'll be able to see right here in Melbourne. Not here in Melbourne, we're in Sydney, but, you'll be able to see here in Australia, down in Melbourne, home of the Matildas. That's 3 p.m. Sunday, 29th of March. If you're in Melbourne, get around it, get tickets. Go have a look at some amazing, continental football at the club stage after you've just seen it here on the international stage, I should say. It's late. I'm tired. I'm not going to lie. Thank you so much for joining us here throughout the tournament. We're going to have a tournament review episode as well. So we'll be back, to continue the fallout here, as I said. If you've liked any of the content we've done over the last few weeks, drop a like, follow, subscribe. I've said this, in the last couple of episodes as well. We hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. It allows us to enter the content monetization program, which means that we can continue to bring you great content. It's not easy to, be taking time off work to do these sorts of things, to be flying around the country. We do it for the love of the game. We do it because we want to, and it's the easiest way for you to be able to help support the Dubcast grow and create more content, things like the scouting series, and stuff like that, because that stuff takes a lot of time to put together. So I absolutely appreciate every single one of you who has subscribed and follows us on your respective podcasting platforms, those who, will do it in the future. But even then, just anyone who's viewed our content, we greatly appreciate it. Even if you disagree with us, that's fine. That's football. That's media. We're allowed to disagree with each other at times, and I think that often gets lost. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your company throughout this tournament. It's been a grind bringing this every day, but I absolutely appreciate it. Burke, any final thoughts from you?
I've had a great time. I hope you've all had a great time engaging with our content. Yeah, and lucky for you, there's more to come.
There is indeed. For Burke, my name is Poletti. We thank you so much for joining us here on the Dubcast. And we'll be back later this week with more fallout from the Women's Asian Cup and as we get back into the A-League Women competition.